Hello and welcome to Wild Moments, powered by explore.org. My name is Jamez Hendrai, and joining us from Cape Town, we have got Trishayla Nadu. She is sitting in the cold, cloudy, and windy Western Cape. Apart from governance advantages, I don't really see an advantage to being in the Western Cape, but there it is. We're still waiting for rain here in the northern parts of the country. It's very dry and very warm and rather lovely as spring and summer take hold. I hope you're all very well wherever you happen to be in the world. You can send us any questions that you might like to on whatever platform that you're watching on. We'd like to hear from you. We have some greetings from Michael S. Hello and good morning from North Carolina. Rolling Trouble. Hi, James and Trishalla from Washington. Zygote. Hi, James, Henry and Trishalla and I do. May Blossom Judy H. Greetings. At the ready. Stuck in bed, good morning from sunny Utah in the USA. Geerda Netherlands, good day, James and Trishalla. Greetings from the Netherlands. John, good afternoon, James and Trishalla from sunny Florida. John, I hope that you didn't have any trouble from Hurricane Ian. I am now going to allow Trishalla to speak.
All I have to say is, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm very excited to be back. I had a bit of a break, but I'm very excited to be back and look at all the wonderful clips that we have this week.
Right, so for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are looking at highlights from the Africam live cameras settled around South Africa, and we're going to look at 4 of those over the course of the next little while. I think before Trishalla gets too much into her crisp Cape Sauvignon Blanc, we will go on with the
I won't show my glass.
There we go. Okay, so what we have got here is the national animal, a springbok, and a very small national animal, a small springbok lamb, and the ewe there is just licking off the amniotic fluid, which will have come from the amniotic sac. And then a rather strange behavior, perhaps. Another ewe is shoving the little one around. I suppose, strictly speaking, these are gazelles, so they should be called fawns, the little babies, as opposed to lambs. So let's just watch what happens here.
Oh.
Now that is very odd. I mean, I would interpret that as mating behavior. But that is a female. That is a ewe. Now, my wife said to me at the beginning of the week, she said, do you want to come and look at the strange clip that we're going to do in Wild Moments? And I said, no, let me just watch it during Wild Moments, because then it's more exciting. I'm beginning to wish I had watched it, because this is very difficult to interpret.
I can't say I've ever seen something like that.
No, nor have I.
Not by any stretch.
No, my only thought here is that obviously when birth occurs, there is a wash of various hormones that will create very powerful hormones in great volume that will result in animals behaving in a way that might be construed as sexual, I suppose. And I can only think that that's what's going on here. I have used to know the names of all these hormones. I've since forgotten most of them. And so I'm not sure which hormones are responsible for that sort of behavior, but that would be my only interpretation there. I mean, that's just plain weird, especially as that's not a ram. I mean, I think that's the mother.
It's very odd. James, did you say, because I didn't think that this is the mother of the lamb or the fawn. This looks like the other one that was coming in.
I mean, I don't know how it might be. But I mean, where's the mother then?
Yeah, exactly. Now they're by themselves, so it probably is the mother. That is very, very odd.
That is a ewe? I'm not mistaken. No, it is definitely that's definitely a female.
That's definitely a ewe. Yeah. Oh, so, I've never seen something.
Yeah, anybody got any good ideas there? Well, just give a few more greetings while perhaps some of you send through some ideas. Amber, you say happy Thursday to all. Thank you very much. Jan Powers, hello. Yes, wonderful to be with you. And good afternoon, James and Trish from France. Marie-Claude. Bonjour, Marie-Claude.
Bonjour.
Teresa B, happy Thursday. James and Charlotte from Indiana. Thank you, Teresa B. Yeah, no, look, we do see female animals often mounting other female animals and sometimes male animals, but youngsters like that, I'm really not sure. I don't think I've seen it before. And stuck in bed, you're saying hormones. I feel like that's a slightly lazy for myself. I feel like it's a slightly lazy explanation, but I really can't think of anything else.
I can think of one other possibility, but it's a stretch. And that
Yeah.
would be if that is the mother, then
Mhm.
and it's obviously recently given birth because you can still see the umbilical cord hanging off the little fawn.
Yeah.
Um, then perhaps she's trying to move the springbok, as in trying to get it to move, but is experiencing some discomfort
Yeah.
herself.
Maybe.
And so this is the way that she's most comfortable moving at this time.
I mean, a few of you have said that yes, you thought that it was herding the baby somewhere. I just, I'm afraid I don't buy that. I think that when they herd the baby somewhere, they move with their bodies, they'll push them
Yeah.
sideways, push them with their heads. Like we said at the very beginning of that clip, so if we go back to the very beginning of it, if you watch when the other one comes in here, when the new one comes in, you'll see that she moves the baby with her head. There's a little bunt there, you see, like that. That's how I think they move the youngsters. And then the little one decides to have a bit of a lie down.
I mean, it could also be her way of trying to get the youngster underneath her, which would make it put it into a feeding position.
Yeah, yeah, maybe, or just a
Like,
protective
yeah.
sort of yeah situation. Perhaps let's keep an eye out on that camera and see if we can see it happening again. I think it's very interesting. Michael S, you
And
say it's confused. Carry on.
oftentimes it's a combination of these things. You know, it can be a combination of
Yeah.
hormonal changes that are forcing her to move and push in
Hmm.
a certain way, but ultimately she's trying to protect. So it's not always one or the other. I mean,
No. Yeah.
most often in the bush, it's a combination of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. So she wants to move the baby, but is awash with these strange hormones, and that's how
Mm.
she's moving the baby. I mean, I don't think we'll ever know. April Owl, you say, I wonder if the poor babe got a feeding. Yes, I'm sure she did. And five girls. If it's the mother, maybe she's trying to introduce the fawn to where to nurse. That is a possibility. Yeah, I've certainly never seen it before, but yeah, I don't see why that shouldn't be a possibility. It's just a really kind of obvious mounting behavior that
Mm.
I was recently in the Lowveld spending time with the white lions of the Timbavati.
As you do.
As one does, as one does, and the white lioness was doing that repeatedly to a number of her uh, lioness colleagues, but at the same time flirting and mating with a male. So who knows? Very interesting. All right, let's move on to the next clip. Ah, this is a Varux's eagle owl, and it's catched itself a snook. Well, well, well. Now, I believe that some of you thought that this was a black mamba. I would say that it is impossible to say whether that is a black mamba or not. I would say it's almost impossible to say what species of snake it is. Safe to say that I don't think it's a cobra, and I don't think it's a cobra because it's not standing up and spreading a hood.
Yeah. And I would also say it's not a boom because the eyes are too small.
Yeah. It's also not in a worm, of course.
Yes, that too.
It may have been caught in a worm. Worm is a tree. I think that this is an olive grass snake. That would be my guess. It could be it's not a puff adder. It's not a night adder. It could be a cobra, but I think it's unlikely because I do think that it would have. Now you see how it's constricting the one foot there,
Mm-hmm.
and the grass snakes do that, and they can also get quite. But this is big. It's not that big. It's also not striking.
Yeah, and it's really is, James, so difficult to tell because what we're seeing is just a part of its body, and it's interfered as well. It's just so difficult.
I mean, we can definitely say it's not an adder. We can definitely say it's not a python. I think it's very unlikely to be a mamba because, well, it's not impossible that it's a mamba. JJ says a snake's not dangerous to owls if they bite. I mean, I think that an owl would be in trouble if a black mamba bit it. But there's no reason the owl wouldn't know what was venomous and what wasn't. And especially, I mean, that snake was initially, the owl didn't have its head under control. So it was, it wasn't quite striking, but it was certainly wheeling around. If we can just go back to the clip while we discuss it so that we can look again. I feel like a cobra, and then it has got the head.
Yes, exactly. It's got the head, and then it strikes with it. The owl gets the head, bites the head first before anything else.
Yeah. It's very cool. Amazing to see. I mean, that snake is in a bad way. There's no way it's going to survive this encounter.
But I'm also thinking about what snake would be moving about at this time of night for the owl to be able to see snakes. It and hunt for it.
Yeah, could be a mole snake. Could easily be a mole snake, actually.
This is at a waterhole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is at a waterhole, so it does mean that there is, I think there is actually some artificial light here as well, which would have helped this owl.
Okay.
That's really very cool. I'm just going to check quickly because I don't think that they're known for eating snakes necessarily. Let me just check my bird application.
I think it's wonderful the amount of control that this Varux eagle seems to exercise on the snake, just from its talons, essentially.
Yeah.
Very small eyes on this.
Of the snake, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just reading through an extensive list of things that it eats. It just says does eat reptiles and amphibians, although definitely not in the main. Eats other birds, mammals. Yeah, but not a lot by way of reptiles, and no specific mentions of snake species. So that's really cool. I wonder if the light here didn't have something to do with it.
Yeah, I think quite possibly. This is very cool.
Adam Coral Pan in the Sabi Sands, where there is a light, but it was quite far back from the pan.
Although with the weakness of a snake's body, that little bit of light could alert the owl to its presence immediately.
Yeah, especially with an owl's eyes.
Absolutely, yeah.
May Blossom, you are you say hashtag not Python. Yep, thank you very much for that. Absolutely correct. David, hello. You make mention and tribute almost to the snake when you say tough snake. Yes, it is a tough snake. It's at a very tough time. I suspect that it is no longer with us, in spirit anyway. Its remains, perhaps, in the form of a pellet.
That I would love to talk through.
Yes, you would love to dissect that, Trishala. That is your general vibe. Dissection of foulness. Okay, let's go to the next clip. Oh, goodness gracious. Here we have a tale of incest taking place at Tembe Game Reserve. So much like the Lion King. That is Astarte the lioness and Greedy the lion. And they have just collared Astarte the lioness. So if some of you are wondering if it's F70, their mother, it is in fact the sister. And so a tale of, I suppose it could be considered a tale of incest, or in fact just a tale much like the Game of Thrones or House of Dragon, which the latest episode contained a really rather troubling scene, much like this one. Now, I was recently at Tembe and we were chatting to the owner of the Tembe Lodge, or certainly the manager, and he was making mention of the fact that the collared lionesses here are often, if not always, put on some kind of contraception. And that's because it is a contained reserve. It's about 11,000 hectares. And lions obviously breed incredibly fast if you're not careful. And you can soon be overrun by them. And you don't really want to have to cull lions if you can avoid it. And so they put the lionesses on contraception. And I think that's quite an interesting point. On the other hand, here we can see F70, I think, in the background and Astarte in the front, both with their collars on. And you can see they definitely have had some rain. Yeah.
I think that's it. So you were mentioning that they put the lionesses on contraceptives, but Astarte is even have had her first litter yet.
Astarte hasn't had her first litter, no.
Yeah. Is it not odd that they would have put on contraceptives before she was able to breed at all?
No, I don't think it is. I think they probably watched her mating and decided to put her on immediately. I suppose they just, I suppose what they do is just try and contain the lions, with a certain number. And so maybe sometimes they don't put them on contraception and they let them breed. But the other interesting thing that we were told is that the lions there tend not, in fact, to make prides. They just kind of have these loose affiliations and groupings, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because, in a place like Pinda, which is a similar sort of size, there definitely are prides. There was always the North Pride and the South Pride, and I suspect as it's got bigger, there have been more prides. So I think it's quite interesting that at Tembe there don't seem to be very distinct pride units. And I don't think that's why these two are mating. It's entirely normal lion behavior to be mating brother and sister if the big males are not chasing the smaller males out. So, and clearly old Greedy, although he has been beaten up once or twice by the territorial males, he certainly hasn't been successfully chased out completely. So that's quite interesting.
And being chased out is a sort of a natural way to avoid inbreeding. Because it pushes away your relative, and here it's sort of, it doesn't exist. So it's natural for it to happen, but I can't say that I fact checked this, but I remember there being some sort of mention of cats being able to go through at least 3 to 5 points of inbreeding before it becomes a major issue. And I know with African lions, they have a larger or more genetic diversity than say Asiatic lions. But still, I'm yet to see, in my experience, a cub that is a result of 5 generations of inbreeding.
No, quite. And you haven't counted their toes if you have.
Exactly.
Or checked out their IQ. So, yeah, I think this is very interesting. I think that it definitely happens a lot more than we think it does, perhaps. But as Trishada says, that 3 to 5 generations quote is very much a guide quote.
Yes.
That I haven't read a paper on it, so I don't know if that's comprehensively true or not. It's very much something you'd read in a book that trains guides or a sort of field guide without necessarily a reference next to it. So I'm not sure how true that is. But it is totally normal behavior all the time.
I've been recently looking at it. Just generally over the last week and looking at this inbreeding number that I've been told for a while. And I haven't really been able to find it. The only things I could find were comparisons between genetic diversity in African lions versus Asiatic lions.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Gigi, you say excuse me, can contraception have negative effect on lion dynamics? I suppose it probably could, although I mean I don't think as much as it might in elephants, for example. Apparently, contraception in elephants can be quite difficult. If the cows don't conceive and don't produce calves, there can be sort of some social upheaval. More than that, I can't tell you. Can contraception have negative effects on lion dynamics? Yes, I mean, I suppose it's possible that it could. I'm just trying to think of what negativity there could be. I would imagine that it's fairly minimal, I mean, I don't, unless a lioness is going to be pining to have babies, like a human being who struggles to conceive might, then I suppose it might. But, I don't really see that happening. And I think they come into estrus, they mate, and then they go out of estrus if they don't conceive. So, I mean, possibly there are consequences I'm not thinking of, but yeah, I don't think so.
But the thing with that is, I think it can go either way. It can either be no issue at all, because ultimately they get into estrus and then they conceive, or rather they mate, so the action is done. So maybe in some way they feel satisfied. But the other end of that is perhaps there is some kind of maturation or change in behavior that is accompanied by them falling pregnant, and we wouldn't know that. Maybe there's something that's a change. There's a change in their status amongst the pride. If they do fall pregnant, a change in their smell, something like that, that we have nothing, no information about. So it could be something major, or it could be nothing at all.
Yeah, I suspect there is some research on it, but I'm afraid I don't know of any offhand. May Blossom, thoughts on how closed reserves can alter animal behavior? Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing, it's a big question. I think that it's for a lot of animals it doesn't make a big difference, but for the keystone species it does. Elephants especially, they are very clearly going to move on very distinctive paths to water they know, to feeding grounds they know. They're never going to leave an area completely. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in a place like Madikwe, for example, which is about 60,000 hectares, there, the area has modified substantially because of the presence of elephants. And I think their behavior has changed in so much as they don't need to migrate. Same with something like wildebeest. They're not going to have to migrate or move in a closed situation. But remember, a closed reserve is not necessarily just with fences. Something like the Sabi Sands is not closed, but it is relatively closed because of the water that's provided, which means that animals don't need to move. So, yeah, I think for those animals that would normally move, there's obviously, or disperse, as is the case with the big cats or with wild dogs and hyenas, I think it definitely does alter their behavior. But I think for a lot of the smallest territorial species and those that are water dependent, like impala or nyala or that sort of thing, it probably doesn't make a huge difference. Yeah. But you do have to you've got to manage the predator populations, and that's really the difficulty. And stuck in bed, you're saying, do I think they will take down the fences on this reserve? No, they can't. Stuck in bed because they're not bounded on the South African side by other reserves. They're bounded by community land owned by the Tembe people. So no, they're definitely not going to drop the fences. I think they could drop them into Mozambique, and that may happen in the not too distant future. But no, they're not going to drop them in South Africa. Zygote, does Ngorongoro Crater have an inbreeding issue? I don't know. I know the Ngorongoro Crater is bounded, of course, by the crater, but other than that, animals can move in and out of there. And I suspect that I've never heard of an inbreeding issue in Ngorongoro, so there could be, but I don't think so. JJ, why can't a closed reserve have more lions? Does there have to be a limit? Yes, JJ, there definitely has to be a limit. I mean, you can't just let them breed uncontrollably because there are no natural predators really other than other lions. So you can imagine an 11,000 hectare reserve, if they had 150 lions there, that first of all eat everything to death, then they'd start fighting with each other, and there would be absolutely no balance between predator and prey. And yeah, I think it would be a disastrous situation. Yeah.
Yeah. And then ultimately, the lions will have to be put down so that everything else can be reintroduced. So it's just a huge negative side.
Yeah. I think it is worth mentioning that they do sometimes have to put lions down on closed reserves because it is very difficult. And most of the time what they do is they'll swap. So one closed reserve will need a new male and one will need a new female or whatever it is, and they'll just swap them around a bit and try and mimic natural movement. But sometimes they do have to be put down rather than just left to suffer or to overpopulate an area that could affect other species negatively. But as far as possible, people try desperately to move them around when they can. I'm going to take one more question on this. It's not really this, but it's a really interesting one, and I have a strong view on this, and Trishala may also. Trishala, you're going to take this one. What's your view on animals kept in zoos? It's natural for animals to roam wild. Animals in captivity are looked after, and breeding can occur, which can save some species from extinction. Richard in the UK.
I used to have a very strong view on this because obviously I don't want to see animals in zoos. I think it's unnatural, and I think that it really can't. If we're trying to allow animals to behave in a natural way, then zoos are just not conducive to that. But at the same time, education is a huge thing for me. And I've been to countless zoos in my lifetime. And if it weren't for those countless zoos, I don't know if I would have had the same kind of interest in the environment and animals that I do now. So I owe something to them. And I would like for other youngsters to be able to see something in a zoo and be like, oh, I want to learn more. And if that's gone, I think that it could be something else has to take its place. Otherwise, it's just going to be removed from children's lives. That being said, I do like my preference to zoos would be open range zoos. I don't think they are those in South Africa, but I know that in Australia we have open range zoos where it's like basically they create an environment where those animals would live together. So there'd be giraffe and rhino, everything living together. And I think that it is beneficial. In fact, one of my outlandish dreams is to create some kind of zoo type area where it is this massive property and animals are actually just existing in their own space where they wouldn't actually know that they were in a zoo, if that makes sense.
It's called a game reserve.
It's called a game reserve, yeah. I think you're right. I think it is called a game reserve. And I want boardwalks, boardwalks overhead so that people could walk and look below and see animals existing as usual, as opposed to vehicles and glass and cages. But I think it is beneficial because it ignites curiosity and the pursuit of knowledge in people, especially young people.
For me, I agree with everything Tricia said. I also would like to add that they are important repositories of genetic material for threatened animals. So,
Yes.
a lot of animals are going extinct in the wild. Without zoos to hold the genetics, we would have, in many cases, no way of saving species. And so I do think they play an important conservation role. It's not ideal. It's really not great for a lot of the animals to live in zoos. But I think they're important. And you go to the Johannesburg Zoo, which is a smallish zoo. It's not massive. The enclosures are not huge. But every single day you go there, there are busloads of kids from poor areas in Johannesburg that are going in there and being introduced to a world never, ever otherwise be introduced to. And from those kids are going to come the champions of conservation in the future. And I think it's just absolutely crucial that we maintain them and in the most humane way possible. So they're not ideal. I wish we didn't have to have them, but we need them. We need them for conservation, I think. That's what I think anyway.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right. We have kind of run out of time. Kirsten, are we doing the last clip quickly? Should we do it? We'll do it very quickly.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
There's a buffalo about to eat a crocodile. Oh my goodness, this is hilarious.
What is that?
That's hilarious. The crocodiles really don't seem to be taking the buffalo very seriously at all. And the buffalo, being very small of IQ, in my opinion, are very confused about what's going on there.
That was what I was trying really hard not to say. Was that they look dumb.
I think they are truly gormless animals. There's no reason a buffalo should ever be killed by a lion if they just thought about it and stood still. But they don't. There's also, on the social media doing the rounds at the moment, is a fairly or very difficult thing to watch of a pack of wild dogs. There must be over 40 of them taking down a buffalo in either Mana Pools or Lower Zambezi National Park in Zambia, and it's horrendous to watch. But again, there is no reason those buffalo needed to die if they just stood their ground, because everything is terrified of the business end of those buffalo. All right, on that note, Trishala, you may go and enjoy the rest of your Sauvignon Blanc there in the fair. I think it's wonderful. I'm going to open the scotch now because, well, it's Thursday, isn't it? Puza Thursday time. We'll see you next time, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. I won't see you next week. I will most likely be in the throes of trying to figure out how to be a father. In fact, that's
exciting.
So we'll keep you posted on that, possibly not with baby just yet. Okay. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you.
Bye-bye.